Today from the global lane, never surrender. The Ayatollah risks making a dangerous miscalculation.
Iran is in a position right now like a feral cat. It's going to lash out, and we don't know how it's going to happen, but we have to be on guard everywhere.
Gaza genocide? Think again. Indigenous minorities in North Africa and the Middle East are now victims of ethnic cleansing. Jews targeted for attack and forced from countries like Egypt, Syria, and Yemen,
which at its peak numbered at 55,000 Jews. One Jew remains in Yemen.
God sent Jonah to Nineveh. Today, Christians there face extinction.
And the most alarming is that ISIS mentality is growing.
And 10 years after ISIS swept through Sinjar, nearly 3,000 Yazidi women and children remain captive.
We know where their locations are, and there's nothing we can do to get them because there's no political will.
Does anyone care?
It's evil not to speak. What would Jesus do if he were me today?
And it's all right here on the global lane. Bring it on. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei digs in his heels after Trump calls on Iran to surrender. Posting on social media, the supreme leader announced the battle begins. Ali returns to Khyber with his Zulfiqar. The references to the 7th century and the first Shia Imam Ali, who conquered the Jewish town of Khyber by sword. Joining us with more is Greg Roman, Executive Director of the Middle East Forum. Greg, Khamenei, his country is weakened. He's no match for the Israeli Air Force, which now has free reign over the skies of Iran. The Times of Israel reports that one Iranian official described the Ayatollah's risk of miscalculation as extremely dangerous. Now, you've been following this for years. So is he likely to surrender or try to usher in an apocalyptic end with the return of the 12th Imam, the Mahdi?
We have to look at what's happening with his background and the officers who have been advising him. The entire command and control structure of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is now gone. People who were advising him the day before the war are no longer in their place, and even their replacements are gone. The only person that's left at the top, very much alone, and even having given orders to a committee of the IRGC to run Iran in case of his demise, is now situated in such a point that in one direction he may capitulate and surrender, in the other he may decide to go all the way. But either way, I think right now he's feeling very lonely at the top, and I think his decisions will be made in such a way that's best for his preservation, not for the preservation of the Islamic Republic.
Yes, it's like calling in a security meeting and nobody shows up. There's no one in the room other than him. So Israel needs U.S. involvement, of course, to take out hard-to-reach underground nuclear enrichment facilities like the Fordo facility in Qum.
24 kilometers northeast of Qum is the Fordo fuel enrichment plant. The fuel being uranium with the capacity to be enriched to weapons-grade levels of 90%.
What we're talking about is a specific American weapon, which is 30,000-pound precision-guided bomb, and it can only be carried by the B-2 stealth bomber right now, because that's the only plane that's configured to carry such a weapon.
So what happens if the U.S. does not join Israel and provide those bunker buster bombs?
Well, Israel has in its battle plans ways in which to disrupt Fordo's operations in Qom in such a way that it can prevent access to the facility rather than to destroy the facility. We already saw this took place in Isfahan and in Natanz, where they bombed the entrances to the underground enrichment facilities, and they also bombed the areas that were providing a supply of electricity. So this notion that you have to destroy the facility by bombing it is one which is a misnomer, insofar as if you're able to cut off the power supply, the centrifuges which are running could be disrupted. And the Israelis have done this before, not using kinetic means. The Stuxnet virus back in 2012 was a way in which to indirectly damage the facility rather than destroying it outright. So it does have other options in case the United States makes the decision to not get kinetically involved.
Well, polls show that most Americans agree that Iran's nuclear program poses a security threat to the United States. However, many do not want to see the United States get involved in another protracted Middle East war. Iran warns it will respond if the U.S. joins the fight. And Iranian state television reported a surprise is coming that the world will remember for centuries. So what are they talking about, Greg? Do they already have a nuclear bomb? How great is their retaliatory capability to harm America?
I don't trust the Iranian rhetoric and propaganda that's coming out of Tehran right now. In fact, we saw that their main broadcasting building was bombed. A symbol of the revolution's ability to try to broadcast its message is now in smithereens. But beyond that, the Iranians do have three significant retaliatory options that the U.S. should be worried about. The first, as you just mentioned, is the missile threat. The second is the unconventional threat, not just the nuclear bomb, but the potential use of a radiological or dirty bomb that can be on the top of a missile or brought in by other unconventional means. But the biggest threat that the U.S. has to worry about now with its bases overseas and also here at home is Iranian sleeper cells and their ability to wage asymmetrical warfare, the type that killed thousands of American soldiers in Iraq, and the way in which it has also used over the last 46 years to wage terror attacks against Western targets. So the U.S. doesn't just have to be on guard in the region, it also has to be on guard here at home. And that's regardless of whether the U.S. attacks Iran or not. Iran is in a position right now like a feral cat. It's going to lash out, and we don't know how it's going to happen, but we have to be on guard everywhere.
And Greg, the son of the late Shah, Reza Pahlavi, is considered a leading candidate to lead Iran if the regime falls.
The regime's apparatus of repression is falling apart. All that is needed is popular uprising to end this nightmare once and for all. Now is the time to resist. Now is the time to reclaim Iran.
He says the time is now for an uprising, but so far it's yet to materialize. The streets of the capital, Tehran, are empty. Some Iranians I've talked to say they don't want Pahlavi and a return to the monarchy of 50 years ago. So how are the Iranian people responding to all of this?
Well, the best way for the Iranian, especially the opposition, the Iranian people and its opposition outside of the country to connect with people inside the country is to use non-kinetic means. There are entities that exist within the country, whether it be the Bus Drivers Transportation Committee, the truck drivers that were just leading a strike for the past 2 weeks, or even local neighborhood councils, which are all able to organize on a local level. And it's not necessarily going to be the Crown Prince who has the ability to do this, even though he is a very important part of a future transition to a democratic Iran or a government of Iran that's different from those ruled by the Ayatollahs right now. But it requires the U.S. to adopt a policy to allow those opposition groups to unify with those inside the country. And when it becomes U.S. policy to do so, I think you'll see the ability to have a controlled implosion of the regime rather than the chaos that may result if there's not any Western guidance for that process to take place.
Okay, we'll see what happens. Greg Roman, Middle East Forum Executive Director. Thanks, Greg. It's always a good time talking with you. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Gary.
Indigenous minorities of the Middle East, including Christians, Jews, and Yazidis, are facing the threat of extinction due to militant Islam. This issue was the focus of a panel discussion I hosted at the 15th Annual Coptic Solidarity Conference on Capitol Hill. This week, I'd like to share some insights from this enlightening discussion. For many years, Jews in North Africa and the Middle East faced discrimination, but they were still able to pursue religious, educational, and professional opportunities. Jews took pride in their countries and contributed significantly to the cultural, social, political, and economic development of their nations. However, with the rise of Nazism and the subsequent establishment of the modern state of Israel, Jews in the Middle East and North Africa found their once relatively peaceful lives to be fleeting. Today, outside of Israel, Judaism in North Africa and the Middle East is nearly non-existent. Hillary Miller, a policy analyst with the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, argues that everything changed when Arab nationalism, Nazi propaganda, and anti-Semitism gained a stronghold.
State-sanctioned repressive measures, coupled with violence, precipitated a mass displacement of Jews who were either forcibly uprooted from their homes or became subjugated political hostages of the Arab-Israeli conflict. And as these Jews fled en masse, their schools and shops were burned, their homes were looted and pillaged, their synagogues were desecrated, their assets were plundered. Entire communities which had existed for millennia, capitulated to this total legal and physical assault of the mid-20th century. And so this is the tragedy that befell the 150,000 Jews of Algeria, where fewer than 100 Jews live today. And this is the tragedy that befell the 20,000 Jews of Lebanon, where 20 Jews live today. At its height in the 1940s, the Jewish community of Egypt numbered at 80,000. 80,000. Today, there are fewer than 10 Jews residing between Alexandria and Cairo. And while the community size is a fraction of what it once was, the Egyptian government continues to actively promote or tolerate anti-Semitism. The conflict triggered by Hamas's October 7th terrorist attacks on Israel contributed to a marked rise in anti-Jewish sentiment in Egypt. For instance, in January 2024, an Egyptian book depicting anti-Semitic tropes and promoting ostensible Jewish plans to dominate the world was displayed at the state-run Cairo International Book Fair. Elected officials and state media outlets continue to invoke anti-Semitic canards and deliberately misrepresent the history of the Holocaust. And while the government has made some improvements to state curriculum, textbooks continue to grossly stereotype Jews as greedy swindlers engaged in finance and omit material on the Holocaust.
The Egyptians are not the only ones perpetuating state-sanctioned anti-Semitism against the nearly extinct Jewish minority in their country. On the edge of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, one of Iran's proxies, the Houthi militia in Yemen, is also targeting Jews, forcing many to flee.
USERV's 2025 annual report again designated the Houthi movement as an entity of particular concern for committing severe, ongoing, and systematic religious freedom violations. Today, from an ancient community nearly 2,000 years old, which at its peak numbered at 55,000 Jews, one Jew remains in Yemen. His name is Libby Marhabi, and he has languished in Houthi prison since 2016. His crime? Attempting to carry a Torah scroll from Yemen to Israel. Libby carries with him the historical weight of the Jews of Yemen, one of the world's oldest Jewish diasporic communities, singular in its distinct religious tradition, in its unique Hebrew dialect, and in its preservation of ancient practices. Former detainees report that Houthi prison officials have selectively mistreated and abused Libby, all for his being a Jew. He has repeatedly been withheld food and subjected to physical beatings, solitary confinement, electrical shocks, and hours-long interrogations. Jew hate became and still remains a staple of the Houthis' animating ethos. Their slogan reads, "Death to America, death to Israel, curses upon the Jews."
Pro-Hamas protesters in the United States claim that the Israelis are committing genocide against the people of Gaza. We've informed you about the disappearing Jewish population. Up next, we'll reveal more truths about other minority victims of ethnic cleansing in the Middle East. Assyrian Christians argue that their community is experiencing ethnic cleansing in the ancient Nineveh plain. Carmela Borashan, the director of the Sussex Evangelistic Association and a representative of the Assyrian International Council, joined the panel of experts. Persecution of Assyrians has been going on for centuries. What is different now?
Basically, nothing has changed. The mentality, the region has been taken over by the ISIS mentality that resided since 7th century in that region, pushing everybody out of there. They persecuted us. They said, this is an exact statement, you are Christians, you're supporting the Western world, so they killed us. They said, you're Christian, you're supporting Israel, they killed us. You're Christian, you support United States, they slaughtered us. And none of them stood by us. It used to be 1.5 million Assyrians once in Iraq only. It has dwindled down to less than 300,000. And they are aligned to leave more due to the Islamization of minors in Iraq and the land grabbing, which is a very common practice in Kurdistan region of Iraq. We are Ninevites. They're bringing Shabaks residing them, and Kurdistan government paying Kurds from Iran, Turkey, and Syria, bringing them in Nineveh Plain and in Kirkuk, and giving them voting powers. And they took our parliamentarian seats and putting proxies in there. And the most alarming is that ISIS mentality is growing. Everything that is happening in Iraq, everywhere in Iraq, is these restrictions aligned with the United Nations definition of genocide in the UN Genocide Convention, Article 2C.
Well, I was going to ask you if you consider it genocide. What is happening?
It is very subtle ethnic cleansing that is covered really well, and a lot of Western world don't see it because they are protecting the patriarchs, and they say, we are very tolerant for this religion, but we can see the Sharia law is being implemented by destruction of Assyrian alcohol shops and hate speeches in the mosques and everything else that follows.
The plight of minorities in North Africa and the Middle East is alarming, affecting not only Christian and Jewish communities, but also Yazidi populations. For nearly 70 years, there's been state-sponsored displacement and destruction of Yazidi communities in northern Iraq. The most horrific recent event occurred in 2014, when ISIS attacked Mount Sinjar and surrounding Yazidi areas, resulting in the slaughter of many individuals and the kidnapping of over 10,000 Yazidi women and children. More than 10 years later, approximately one-third of those kidnapped are still missing. Jamila Nadzo, the president of the Canadian Yazidi Association, is among those actively advocating their rescue. We had 10,000 Yazidis, mostly women and children, that were kidnapped by ISIS in the 2014-2015 period. And 3,000, as many as 3,000 are still missing, these women. So what can you tell us about what is happening now on the ground?
We know where their locations are. We know the names of these women and children. Like in Canada, we sponsor quite a few Yazidi families, and I sit with these mothers and they show me photos of their kids and they say they're in this house, in this community, on this street, in this village in Iraq. And there's nothing we can do to get them because there's no political will on any fronts, internationally or domestically, to commence with rescue operations. So that's sort of the situation we're in right now in terms of rescue operations. We know it's possible. The U.S. just a few months ago rescued a young Yazidi woman from Gaza in coordination with the IDF, the Jordanians, and other diplomatic missions in the region. So we know that, you know, when the U.S. puts its political sort of power behind these types of operations, it is possible. We just we need more of it.
Well, maybe some rescued Yazidi women should go and meet with President Trump. I think that would probably get him behind it.
There's certain things you can't say. Don't speak up. Wait until we have our piece of the pie. Wait until we're done our conversations. Wait until we get billion-dollar oil and gas deals. Wait till we get X, Y, and Z. And then maybe, if there's time, we'll have a prayer breakfast and we'll invite you and we'll say we're advancing religious minority rights in the Middle East, and we're a safe haven for groups like yours. So it's a lot of marketing and nice words, and it's our communities are being left behind, and we are being uprooted, and we are on the brink of being extinct.
Up next, what can be done to save these minority communities on the edge of extinction? Some thoughts from former Congressman Frank Wolf, a champion and advocate for religious freedom. Indigenous minorities in North Africa and the Middle East are facing extinction. So what can be done about it? Former Virginia Congressman Frank Wolf has some ideas. He's been fighting for religious freedom for years. At the recent Coptic Solidarity Conference in Washington, Wolf scolded American Christians and others for not getting involved.
I personally am speaking for myself. I've been disappointed in a lack of interest and action by the church in the West. During the Civil Rights Movement, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King expressed it well. Dr. King said, and I quote Dr. King, he said, "In deep disappointment, I have wept over the laxity of the church." Dr. King went on to say, so often the contemporary church is a weak, ineffectual voice with an uncertain sound. The war in Europe against the Nazis began in 1939, but the seeds of virulent anti-Semitism, which led to the Holocaust, were sown in the early 1930s by the Nazis. They were sown in 1931, 1932, 1933, 1934, 1935, 1936, 1937, 1938, and the world stood by. The world stood by and did, frankly, nothing. William Wilberforce said this to his fellow countrymen about the evils of the slave trade. Wilberforce said, "You may choose to look the other way, but you can never say again you do not know." Nobody in Congress can say they do not know. Nobody in the Trump administration can say they do not know. Nobody in the State Department can say they do not know. Nobody in the church, if you read the Washington Times, the New York Times, the Washington Post, you can't say you don't. You can't say you don't know. The second quote is from a friend of German Lutheran pastor and anti-Nazi dissident, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, "Silence in the face of evil is evil itself." If you see something going on and you don't say anything, how do you do? It's evil not to speak. What would Jesus do if he were me today? I believe Jesus would be helping the persecuted Christians and other religious minorities in the Middle East and opposing the hate of anti-Semitism. The Trump administration should be doing the same. The State Department should be doing the same. The Congress should be doing the same. The church should be doing the same. And we all should be doing the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you, former Congressman Wolf. I couldn't agree more. WWJD. Well, that's it today from the Global Lane. Until next time, be blessed.